Tech Cocktail Conversations, candid insights from startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from around the globe.
I'm Ali Partovi, and I'm both an entrepreneur and an investor. I was a co-founder at iLike and way back when at Link Exchange with Tony Hsieh. And as an investor, I've invested in Dropbox, O-Power, Zappos, and a range of other companies. I would say I talked a little bit about the importance of investing in people and how big a difference good people can make or bad people can make on the outcome. But the main focus was about risk, and basically a very simple message, which is it's easy as a human being to be afraid of risk and to want to figure out ways to reduce your risk. But as a startup, you really are better off embracing risk, maximizing your risk, because risk is actually your competitive advantage. Risk is the one thing you can do that the bigger guys can't really do. And every temptation to diversify or to hedge or to reduce your risk is actually likely to slow you down. Whenever you're faced with a choice where there's a risky path and a safe path, you're actually better off taking the risky path. So it's a competitive advantage, meaning the competition, the big companies basically have something to lose, and as a result are much more afraid to try new risky things. And so if you try to play in safe waters, those are the same waters that the big companies will feel safe in. Whereas if you go into risky waters, that's where the big companies will be afraid to follow you, and that's your best chance of finding some opportunity that you get to have all to yourself. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I mean, generally speaking, big companies have something to lose. They have an established business that they don't want to cannibalize or compromise. And if you come up with something disruptive that is completely new and different, the bigger company is less likely to want to follow you. Essentially, this is a difference between very disruptive ideas versus incremental ideas. Like if I come up with a new concept that will make the travel industry 10% more profitable, existing travel giants might figure out they can try that too. They'll be 10% more profitable using the same tactic. But if I have something like Airbnb, which is just completely disrupts the whole idea of how hotels work, the existing travel industry cannot compete with that. Of the startups I've invested in, the easy answer is Dropbox. Dropbox, I think at this point I can't really call it a startup anymore, but I love that company, and for me it still is a startup in my head. Of companies that I've not invested in, I think the most promising startup in Silicon Valley today is WhatsApp. It's a really interesting situation because it's a rare case of a company headquartered here in Silicon Valley, that is, headquartered in America, that has almost no users in America. It's got an enormous international footprint, and I think it's the most powerful mobile company in the world, and more powerful than any carrier or handset maker. People are willing to switch their carrier, they're willing to switch their handset, but if they're using WhatsApp, they're not willing to adopt a carrier or a handset that doesn't support WhatsApp. It's the stickiest, most incredibly established company everywhere in the world outside of America. And I think it's only like 30 or 40 people, and they have an enormous, enormous footprint. There's so many of them. It's hard for me to kind of pick one. There's, I actually don't feel too much pride in my own accomplishments as an entrepreneur. Most of my entrepreneurial successes, I feel like, were either luck or due to having good co-founders. So many of the entrepreneurs that I've backed are way, better than I am. Drew from Dropbox, I look up to in a lot of ways. He was, he was much younger than me, or still is much younger than me, but he was quite young when we first invested in it. My brother and I thought he was, super smart, but had a lot to learn, and he has grown enormously over the past several years to where, I can still give him advice, but it definitely feels like, he has grown into being, I think, a really strong CEO, and I'm really proud of him. another entrepreneur is Dan Yates, and he runs a company called O-Power. It's based in Washington, D.C., so it's not a Silicon Valley startup in the location sense, but it is in the sense of a philosophy that as I mentioned, I think Silicon Valley is not a location only, it's a philosophy. And he is such an amazing combination of technical savvy, and he was a computer science major at Harvard, but also extremely good at sales and understanding the customer, and incredibly hardworking. So it's just a mix of tech savvy, charisma, and hard work. And I've backed 2 of his startups now, and so far very happy with the outcome on both. I think it's 2 factors. One is that I think whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, at some point you become more motivated by impact than by money. And basically, I started out really being worried about, am I going to have enough money to take care of my parents and take care of myself? And money was my main motivator early on. But once you get past those basic necessities and that sense of fear that you have of, I need the money for survival, if you get past that, you discover that it's actually much more addictive and much more motivating to have a sense of impact, to have a sense that what I'm doing matters to people. And money actually just becomes a way of keeping score for how important am I? How much have I done to help people? How much have I done to change the world or to help the world? And I do care about money, but only because it's a way I keep score for have I impacted the world in a positive way. And being an early investor and advisor to Dropbox, I think reflects I've had impact. I helped this fledgling company both with cash and with advice over many years. But in tech investing right now, I actually feel like it's harder to find deals where you have as much sense of impact, in part because there's so many angel investors, so much money in the space that the deal terms are worse, which reflects the fact that basically my value add as an investor is not as high as it was back 5 or 6 years ago. If I got hit by a bus, there'd be 5 other investors with just as much money and just as much wisdom to take my place. Whereas in the sustainable food and agriculture realm, you don't have that situation at all. If I got hit by a bus, it would actually impact this sounds really perhaps self-important, but it would be a big loss to that whole space because I'm one of the few people who really wants to invest in food and agriculture. And so essentially, it's a space where I feel a much greater sense of impact. And I think for the same reason, it's actually a space where I think I can make more money because, like I said earlier, I think money is a way of keeping score for how much impact you've had.